Welcome back to this week's Tech Tuesday. This week we're going to cover sensor diagnosis. We're going to go over each individual sensor and show you certain things that can go wrong that would give you a failed reading in the handheld. There's 4 major sensors on the throttle body EFI systems that we're going to cover today. This is the oxygen sensor, the throttle position sensor, the coolant temperature sensor, and the idle air control motor. These sensors all will throw a fault code in the handheld under the fault code section if something is wrong with them. This would always be the first thing to do when you suspect a faulty sensor. Go and check your fault code section, it may tell you straight there.
A few of the more common sensor-related fault codes include P0129. This means the barometer is reading low. P0116. This means the coolant temp sensor is reading low. And P0117. This means the coolant temp sensor is reading high. P0131. This means the wideband is reading low. This is the oxygen sensor. P0562. This means the battery is low. These aren't the only ones you'll see. For example, there are codes for the TPS and IAT, but these are the most common. Now, we'll go over some common causes of incorrect sensor readings. Across the 4 sensors, the most common cause of a bad sensor reading is interference with its connection. All of the sensors feature wires with a clip that plugs in, and if a sensor connection is forced, you could bend a pin, or if you do not align the female and male ends, the connections will not secure correctly, and it could display symptoms of a faulty sensor. If you are experiencing any issues with the sensor readings, this is the first thing you should check for, as misaligned pins in the connection can compromise proper readings in operation. Also, be sure to have the connector seated and plugged in properly, and ensure that none of the wiring is pulling back on it. Additional things you want to check for on the harness are any pinched wires or melting that may cause a faulty sensor reading. This especially applies to the O2 sensor, as its wiring lead has a close proximity to the exhaust, which can affect readings. It's important to remember that when mounting your O2 sensor, you want to keep it 18 inches from the exhaust tip and port. You should also remember to mount your sensor in an upward angle. We recommend about 10 degrees up from the horizontal point. This is to avoid having an accumulation of condensation on the sensor. This can cause water damage, which will affect readings and also void warranty of the product. While issues such as melting, tears, chafing, or other similar ailments to the wires are the leading cause in oxygen sensors giving faulty readings, it can also be caused by leaded fuel or lead additives. If lead gets into the holes on the sensor, it will create a blockage and interrupt readings. If the oxygen sensor was installed in a manner that would prevent proper readings, such as placing it too close to the exhaust or pinching one of the wires, the AFR reading will be stuck at the target reading of 14.7, rather than fluctuating around it like it's supposed to. With the throttle position sensor, when it's all plugged in, you can go to the handheld and look at the TPS reading on the dashboard. If you slowly open the throttle, you should see an increase in TPS percentage. This increase in value should be steady and fluid. If you see it read 0 and then have a drastic jump or drop in percentage, this would be a good indication that it may have been installed incorrectly and isn't reading properly. If the coolant temperature sensor is installed incorrectly, you can verify this by checking in the handheld and looking at the CTS values. If they're running drastically high or drastically low, this is a good indication that it may be placed in the wrong spot, or that it needs to be scaled via the handheld. Lastly, with the idle air motor, you can use your handheld to look at the IAC steps. The IAC steps are the distance the plunger on the sensor moves in and out. If you do not see movement on the handheld, this means the sensor is not reading. If you've ran through all of the checks we went over in this video and your sensors still aren't giving you proper readings, we recommend contacting our tech support line. There, one of the techs can assist you in determining what is wrong with your sensors and what can be done about them. It is important to remember that a sensor showing improper readings does not necessarily indicate a faulty ECU or throttle body.
So that concludes how to kind of check all the sensors on FiTech EFI systems. One of the things that I would always encourage too is if you're not 100% sure that a sensor is bad and you've checked your connections and verified that they're all secure, you could always go back into that fault code section on the handheld, clear the fault code, run the vehicle around and see if the code comes back. If it comes back, that will be something you want to address. If the code doesn't reappear, most likely it was just some sort of a loose connection. Sometimes the idle air motor code will throw due to poor grounding. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind too. Always make sure you got a good battery connection and a good ground to the engine, because after all, this is electronic fuel injection. Having good electrical power and grounding to the system is very important to the operation of the EFI system itself and all the sensors around it. Thank you for tuning into this week's FiTech Tech Tuesday. If you have any other questions, please comment them down below or visit our website, fitechefi.com, and check out additional tech videos.